Okay, it is the 18th of September at 7:30. I'm calling this meeting to order. Um, things quickly and see what we have going on. Um, the first thing that we have um, is um, I did want to do an announcement here. Um, for those that don't know, Melin is now part of the Board of Finance. So we've done well by continuing to fill those spots there. Um, I believe 4 out of the current members on the Board of Finance are former F&B people. That includes Jim, but so that's good. Okay, I need a motion. Jenny is not doing well, is not feeling well, so I'll take minutes, which is always dangerous. I need a motion to take action on appropriation and bond authorization to repair the Boron Pond Dam. Can I have it moved? Beth, I have you moving. I have Bill Dunn seconding. All right. So I, I'm not going to go over too much of this other than um, the lease has been reviewed and we realize that we still have the responsibility. Oh wait, Holly and Charles are joining. So we're on Gorham Pond. So the lease has been reviewed. It's about 100 years old. We're supposed to be paying a penny a year. We haven't paid pennies for a gazillion years. Um, we don't really know who owns it anymore because they did a search and only one of the properties surrounding Goring Pond actually has it in their lease, in their deed. So, based upon the original lease, the town is still responsible for doing repairs on the pond. We did about 190,000 initially. That's going to be rolled up into the bond authorization. So there's a couple of things associated with this that I'm going to go through. I mean, it has 10% contingency. I hinted out the numbers so we know that it's 3,354,000. So the town will be applying for FEMA grant. The concern that we have is that number one, this work has to be completed by October 31st, 2025 to have the FEMA to apply to the FEMA grant. That means all the paperwork and everything to them. My understanding is that they should be able to do this and complete this before that time with some contingency. But then we don't have really $3.4 million sitting around in our general fund for a long time, which is where they're going to be borrowing the money. And FEMA could take us 3 to 4 years for it to ever pay us back before them doing their work and other things. So chances are, and this was discussed at a Board of Finance meeting, I asked the question and Jen Chinesky said, we'll probably go for a 1-year bond anticipation note and do that for 2 years while we're waiting to see where we stand on FEMA. And then probably roll it into one of our other bond authorizations, which is fine. The next question is, what happens when 3-4 years down the road, we actually recover $3.4 million and we've actually bonded for it? We're not paying off the bonds because it's part of a bigger issue, and we typically have 5 years before we can do that. What actually happens is they can take the $3.4 million, put it in the bond fund, and instead of bonding for, let's say, another round of HHR, they can apply those monies to that bond. But the 3.4 million will only be used for appropriations and bonds that have been approved by the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM. So that's how they would use any reimbursement we're getting from that. So that was my big concern. is making sure that we weren't setting up a slush fund someplace, and we're not. So is there any questions on that? Okay. Are we ready to vote? But I just got to put down everybody who's here. P, two, Lisa, Peter, Molly, missing. Bill, two. Okay. So if we're ready to vote, everybody in favor, raise your hand. That's good enough. That's fine. Done. Next item on the agenda. If you don't mind, I'm going to go to the opioid legal settlement first because that's equally easy. So there's an opioid settlement. The monies go into the attorneys that solve the case. They then distribute the monies. We're not getting the money from the state. We're actually getting it from the fund that was set up when the parties are funding that. The 78,000 that we are currently discussing is monies that we have already received. We should be getting monies for the next 18 years. The amount will not necessarily be the same. They allocated 40,000 already to the teen talk at Middlesex Middle School, which is really a Board of Ed expense, but they're helping out. It's not in the Board of Ed budget. And I believe the other 60,000 of that came from the community fund and other parties associated with it. That's a separate item. How there's $100,000 that eventually is going to have to be in the Board of Ed budget that isn't accounted for anyplace. The town has said that while they're funding the 40,000 this year, that should be down, be going down over time. But the other 38,000 of it, it's in a fund right now. The desire is to give an appropriation for the full amount, which would allow the director of our health director, if programs come up, to then go and apply those funds to that program without having to go to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM, because we're going to give an appropriation for the full amount. The Board of Selectmen will be reviewing. Based upon what the original resolution is, in discussion with Wayne and with subsequently with Jen and Kate, I added to the last whereas that this is for Darien programs consistent with the purpose and intent of the opioid settlement fund. So it can't be used for any program they want, and it's going to be up to the Board of Selectmen to be monitoring this to make sure that these programs are consistent. The 40,000 for the teen talk was signed off by NOF, and it's thought of as prevention. If you're dealing with Middlesex kids that have issues, hopefully by doing that, they're not going to use drugs and opioids. That's their thought process on that. But I wanted to make sure that it was used for those programs associated with opioids, opioid prevention, opioid healing, helping people get back on after they've experienced this. We will have the capability of auditing it because these monies will stay in that fund until such time that they have the program, then it'll be withdrawn. If all the monies are not spent, it stays in the grant fund and isn't swept into the general fund. So they can decide in 1 year that we're going to hold 2 years worth of these payments to before they're going to go for a program, depending upon the cost of the program. The other thing that I had a conversation with Jen about, and we'll take a look at it, is that it may make sense that they know by this time every year, or at least by June, how much money the town has received. And if not in our June meeting, definitely in our September meeting, similar to how we do budget reviews, that on an annual basis, the monies that have been received have a similar appropriation on an annual basis. So that's something we might expect in the future. But we can at that time be saying, what did you spend it on? As opposed to giving a blank check, because this is really a blank check where the Board of Selectmen are looking at it. They don't have to come back to it. So is there any questions on this? Fine. Can I have somebody move it? I have Peter and I have. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
The next is, so I sent out the executive memo on what's going on here. I will tell you some of the highlights. We're going to be primarily the only committee that's working on this. And they go across several, and let me see if I can go find it for a second. There are a total of 34 union positions, 2 in the assessor's office, 5 in the building, 1 in human resources, 2 in land use, 1 in park and rec, 11 in police, but that may also include the fire marshal, 2 in public works, 1 in the selectman's office, 1 in sewer, 2 in tax collection, and 3 in the town clerk. So that's the composition of it. So it's really like 9 in police and or 8 in police and 3 in the fire marshal area. So that's the breakdown. So when I look at what the real cost of this is, Kate did an analysis, and what it does is she looked at, because there's a give back, they're increasing the amount that they paid for medical insurance. There's some groups that get uniforms, others that don't. There's an increase in the defined contribution plan. It used to be mandatory for 5%. That's now mandatory for 7%, with a matching of 7% by the town. It is a 5-year cliff vesting, which means you have to be here for a full 5 years to have any of the town's contributions vested to George. You always keep your own. They had, the interesting thing is with this 4-day work week, some individuals in town work Monday through Friday. Some people work Tuesday through Friday. We just don't see them. And some people work Monday through Thursday. The people who are working like Tuesday through Friday is that we always have a building inspector at one of the building sites on the major avenues going. So they do have people that are doing some coverage here in the office. You just can't get into town hall, but there are people there. So they had to do some changes on that. They also had to do some changes on the bereavement, because they used to give it on hours. And so they had to manipulate some of that to be more consistent with what's going on. They do give approximately 2,400 for tuition reimbursement. However, if you're not still employed 2 years after with the town, 2 years after you've gotten that tuition reimbursement, the town takes the money back. Can take the money back. So that's the highlights of it. Total plan when we add everything up together is about 3.15%. That includes some of the givebacks and some of the other things that are there. The way this works is that there are job classifications at the end of the contract, and then there's steps. If you've been here for more than 6 months, if you're a new employee, 6 months and 1 day, and come July 1st, you get to move to the next step. If you're here for 5 months, on July 1st, you stay at your current step. But after 8 years, you're at the max for that job category for that area. So it maxes out at 8 years. Currently, 40% of the employees that are covered, the 34 people that are covered, have been here and are at the top step. By the end of this 4-year contract, we will have 70% of those employees at the top step. So that means every year, if you just, if you're step 2 and it's your next year, you get the increase from the salary, but you also get an increase from moving from a 2-year step to a 3-year step. With 70% of the people at the top step in the last year of the contract, let me get to that page again. Most of the contract's going to be at 2.8%. 70% of them will only be getting 2.8 because they won't have a step in. So those are the main things about this contract. Is there any questions on it? Some I can answer, but I have the contract, so I took the time to read it. No questions? Okay. So we're voting not to reject. I always love this. We're not voting to approve. So I need somebody to move.
Jack, I realized I do have a question, a quick question, because I saw in the memo that was sent that the dispatchers have formed their own separate.
Yes. So they're not in this.
They're not in this. Like, are we bargaining with them? Like, when will that come up?
Don't know. We had 7 town unions. With that, we have 8. But this is like sort of on the last cycle. So whatever has been done in the prior 6 are now resident, I believe, in here. Maybe the only change that's not in here is the 7%. That's going to go through the next cycle. But we've also moved these contracts from being a 3-year to a 4-year. This actually takes effect July 1st of 2024. In the second pay period, after the RTM votes not to reject, all hours will be recalculated at the new rate and be included in the second paycheck after the RTM approved. Now, those funds have already been put into a salary fund because they weren't built into the budget per se for each of the departments, but there is a reserve fund for salary negotiations, and what they negotiated is going to be taken out of there and covers the increases for 2024. And then you'll see an adjustment going through the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to recast all those numbers for the rest of the budget. So yes, we now have an eighth union, which has 9 employees, and really only had 7 at this time because I believe we're down to. On the 34, we're down to also, but this is a pretty solid group of people that are there. So, any other questions? Okay. Do I have somebody to move this? I have Louisa, and I need a second. I have Bill Smith. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. So that's unanimous. I want to cover one other thing. I'm going to be giving a report on ARPA during the meeting. So I just wanted to cover where that was on certain things. The ARPA funds have to have final agreed contracts, real firm contracts, by December 31st, 2024. And I'm just going to give some example. If the contract says it's 50,000, it then has to be completed by December 31st, 2026. If that contract's not completed by that date, whatever funds has not been spent has to be returned to the federal government. If in fact we sign a contract for 50,000 and it comes in at 48,000, $2,000 has to be returned to the federal government. If one contract comes in at 52 and the other one comes in at 48, and they were both 50,000, we cannot allocate the 2,000 to the other contract. One, we have to find 2,000 of funds through appropriations or the Board of Finance contingency. But the other one, we have to return 2,000 to the government. John Zagroski has sent to all of the department heads a status that where every contract is, confirmed contract is, by October 1st. I believe that some of the placeholders that we had out there that do not have a firm commitment or one in which we think those monies will be spent in its entirety will be taken back from that department and reallocated to something that we know we can spend. In that nature, there were several projects that were going on that were in ARPA. The decision was to close those out and put the money into the contingency. At the same time, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen went into our capital items that we've already approved based upon the capital budget and moved several projects. I'll give you the details. And moved several projects closed them out to the capital reserve fund and put them in those contingency and then moved them into ARPA because we know we're going to spend them. And one example is one of the fire companies, we had $30,000 to replace hoses and we had separated. They originally asked for 60. What we did is we moved what their request would be for 2026 into ARPA this year. So they now have the 60,000 being spent because we can get that done, actually probably get it done and delivered before the end of December. So all the projects that we took away from ARPA, we moved back into the capital reserve account and used and funded them with the Board of Finance capital reserve contingency account that's there, plus 10,000, and that covered all those. So ones that aren't in, that we don't believe will be spent, we'll either go through the process of asking for an appropriation from the Board of Finance and the RTM and funding them, going to see what we have and looking at what we have on the list for 2020, 6, see what we can move in there, or see what capital projects we still have outstanding and can move in there, all of which consistent with what ARP is supposed to be. So that's what they're trying to do. The goal, obviously, is not to give a penny back to the federal government. It's going to be a challenge. So, any questions on that? Okay. So, seeing no questions, like this meeting. I don't have minutes. I mean, they were issued, but I think we've covered everything on the agenda except for one thing. So, what everybody do this summer? Anything interesting? I mean, day after budget, I went to Spain for 2 weeks.
Oh, where
So
you go in Spain?
I landed in Barcelona, went up to Dolly's house up the coast, which is close to France, then spent time in Madrid, then went to Sevilla, from Sevilla to Cordoba, Cordoba to Granada to see Alhambra, then went down to Malaga because it's the beach and we really had packed out. Oh, we spent a day in Toledo also. Since we really packed as if this was a military operation, we decided a couple of days at the beach at Malaga was a good idea.
Mhm.
And then went back to Barcelona to fly back out.
You go there. I went to Spain too.
Yeah, I like southern Spain better than northern Spain. I'm one of the few people that think that Barcelona is a tourist trap. Love Madrid. My traveling companion and I can both spend 4 or 5 hours in a museum. So we spent a lot of time in the 3 main ones in Madrid. I used to go and visit Guernica all the time in the Museum of Modern Art, and it left after the Francoists were no longer in government. So it was nice visiting an old art friend again. But it was nice. Basically, the food was good. Some meals better than others. I did joke that the way you go out to the Midwest and everybody thinks they can make Italian meatballs and spaghetti. Everybody in Spain thinks that they can make paella, but since I cook paella myself, and I know I want that crust down the bottom, and I just asked them, "Do you have a crust? Are you doing this?" "Oh no, okay, fine, I'll go elsewhere." But really, that's really a Valencia type of meal. So, but we had a great time, and that there, and it was a really great trip. And fortunately, my traveling companion speaks Spanish much better than I do. I was accused of not pronouncing words properly, and my response is, I speak English with a Bronx accent. What makes you think I'm going to speak Spanish without that Bronx accent? So,
Hey, Jack, when you were in Madrid, did you visit the Santiago Bernabeu?
yes, we went. We went to. We traveled a lot. I mean, we sort of saw as much as we can. What we were unable to do was they have a Cervantes trail where you could go to all the pubs and the places where he lived and everything like that. And they have a similar one for Hemingway. But, I would have needed to be in Spain for a month to do some of the trips we wanted. But going to Dolly's house was really interesting. So that's where he lived for most of his life until his wife died. And then we went to where he lived for the last 5 years, the museum that he sent up. And that's where he lived for the last 5 years of his life. That's my traveling companion's favorite artist. So, so that was a good trip.
Sounds like an amazing trip.
It was nice. It's the first time we actually got out since COVID. So that we did like some travel. So that was it. I'm sure other people, I mean, the last time, Holly, you went to China for a little bit.
Yeah. Actually, I went to Spain too. I went to Spain and Turkey for 18 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's quite a trip. I and I have been to most of many of the cities you mentioned in Spain,
Yeah.
and we have such a great time there. As you said, it's like a military training schedule. It's very intensive, and we
Yeah.
were exhausted daily. Yeah.
Yeah. But the good thing in Spain is the trains run on time and
Yeah.
they're all bullet trains. And, we could, when we went to Cordoba, we went there in the morning, put our luggage in a secure place, and then then picked it up at the end of the day and went to Granada. So we were only in Cordoba for like the daytime. But
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yes.
Instead of taking a train, I rent a car. So basically, we drove in Spain. It's kind of like every day you have to go to next city, change a hotel.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it's quite an experience too. But we love Spain. So nice.
I rented a car once when working for Chase. I rented a car in Germany,
Yeah.
and I was told by my wife that I drove too slow on the autobahn and far too fast on the local roads. So
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, the one thing I noticed basically the car is manual car. So
I love manual.
really? Okay. I
Yeah.
couldn't have it. My husband has to drive.
Oh, the yeah, two of my four kids know how to drive manual, and two of them just one of them claims that he can drive manual, and it's rather frightening when he is. Um, but yeah, I miss driving manual. On that, I like driving manual. But anything else, or are we gonna take a motion to be done in a half an hour and see everybody next Monday on the meeting? Thank you very much. So can I have a motion to adjourn? I see Beth. I see everybody's hand on seconding that one. All in favor? Thank you very much.